greetings from Paul Levy here at the National Theatre on the south bank of the River Thames here in London in the UK. Reflecting as I reach the end of 2025 on a year in which probably every single time you put your phone on you would have seen two letters. It would either be on an upgraded app on your phone, or it would have been a pop-up on the news, and it might have been in emails that are sent to you despite your efforts not to be bombarded with essentially what is spam. You would have seen AI this, AI lawyers, AI apps that are going to earn you lots of money, AI, and you would have heard, of course, and now it's part of your waking, I would say, life, that AI stands for artificial intelligence. And sitting here reflecting back on the fact that I've been involved in fairly small scale theatre since school, and in some sort of professional capacity since 1999, reflecting back on a field in theatre that, let's go back 20 years before, so kind of coming into the 70s, and then I go to university in 1984 and discover that there is already an existing field called artificial intelligence. There's a journal at the university I go to, co-edited I think with the University of Sussex, called AI and Society. There are textbooks going back even earlier, journals, and artificial intelligence has been around for a very long time, a bit like theatre that's been around even longer. And what I then note as I look back on my year in 2026, that what's been called AI, in my view, and I think the view of a lot of experts who do not like the fact that there is a bubble at the moment, measured financially, that is far greater than the genuine value and measurable benefit that's coming from so-called AI in our age, is that AI is not AI at all. Although the two letters are still very convenient for what it really is, which is artificial impersonation. And it could sound like I'm saying that in some way as trying to spoil the party. And maybe I am, as I look back over 2025, because I am no fan of hype. And interestingly, as I sit here at the National Theatre, I would say artificial intelligence has been around a long time, and in many ways it's a good thing. You can come and see a play here whenever you want, if you can afford it, and you might see a Shakespeare, and you might see Hamlet, you might see one of the Henrys or Richard III, and what you'll see is an actor. Interesting word, to act. And the actor tries to impersonate a different human being, whether it's fictional or whether it's a real person who existed in history. And it's interesting when it is a real person who existed in history. If there's a film where somebody plays Mother Teresa or Marilyn Monroe or Churchill, or whether they play Marlon Brando, quite often they're dressed up to look like them, and in recent movies AI itself and computer graphics are used to make somebody look younger. Have a look at the last Indiana Jones movie, and it's not to in any way denigrate how beautifully Harrison Ford is aging, but in the film he has to play somebody who looks a lot younger. And what we have is artificial Harrison Ford. It's not really him, and we don't have a problem with it because we know it's not really him, and nobody is saying he is younger. It's very transparent. And what you're asked to do is to suspend your disbelief, which people are willingly able to do and want to do. It's why they come to the theatre. They want to get a look into the life of somebody that they've never met, who may not be alive, and somebody impersonates them. Now, in acting, we could get into all kinds of arguments, because a lot of actors would say, I'm not impersonating. And we've got words like portrayal. And there are interpretations where some actors don't try to physically look or sound like somebody, and we suspend our disbelief even further, and we don't mind entering into the truth of a portrayal that's not trying to simply impersonate, and it's certainly not trying to deceive. We are merely but players is one of the famous lines. But it may also be that we are trying to get a complete impersonation to the point where you go, I couldn't tell the difference. And that's where, way before so-called AI came along, there were body doubles in films, and you weren't usually told about that. You didn't know. There were clearly stunt people in movies, and then you heard, oh, she does all her own stunts. and that became a thing that we value, rather than the idea that the person jumping out of a window away from a fire in the disaster movie is a stunt person of the same kind of body dimensions and so on. Certainly I knew somebody in Brighton who was paid not a lot of money to be Christopher Lee's body double in one of the Lord of the Rings films, because Christopher Lee could not roll over once a wand had been pointed at him and sending him scudding across the floor at one of the two towers, I think it was. So we have an interesting ethical thing that normally if somebody impersonates, and we know, and it's functional and we don't mind, that's kind of okay. But when somebody impersonates to deceive, we have an ethical problem. Now, what generative AI is almost entirely, as I said, is not artificial intelligence, as if there's a genuine intelligence at work. You will probably have heard, and there are huge debates about the fact that for current generative AI to work, it has to be pre-trained. It slurps up your data and mine and people's books and writing. And occasionally when it goes wrong, it actually proves rather dodgily that it quotes some pages from somebody's book, which it's not supposed to do, of course. It's supposed to impersonate it and change it and not be exactly like it, because that's copyright breach. And so at the moment, when you go on to ChatGPT and say, oh, it's confused, well, we call that anthropomorphizing. We call it giving it a kind of human sensibility, a human identity that it hasn't actually got, because it impersonates being like a human, and that's in natural language. It talks like we do, but it's not talking as we do. It's not talking from a place of self-awareness. It's not talking from a place of sentience, and it will tell you that. But it will sound like it does, because it's also been trained to impersonate, and it will apologise and say, I'm sorry if I've upset you. I'm afraid I can't do that. And it will say, I'm afraid. And of course, if you challenge it, it says, no, that's just me impersonating language that makes you feel like I'm a bit human, which gives you familiarity. Now, it's for you to decide if you think we've already accepted that when it uses that language, it's not intending to deceive. But I think we have a problem here, which is the lack of transparency in this field, of constantly reminding us that this is not the same as a human being, that this is not an accountant, even though the app might be called AI Accountant, for example, with a picture of somebody smiling that might look a bit like me if I look like an accountant, is we're into all kinds of ethical problems. Now, sweeping those aside, I think we just have another problem, which is this simply isn't AI. It's not actually artificial intelligence, it's fake intelligence. And artificial can be fake, and when we know it's fake, we don't mind having something with artificial additives. If we know what we're getting and it's cheaper, you might choose to eat it. It's far better to be told that this isn't orange. It was the great story of Sunny Delight, which had pictures of oranges in that, I think it was the 1970s or 80s, on this orange juice drink that I think hardly had any, if no orange in it at all, maybe 2%. And putting oranges on it, a bit like when you have eggs that are on an egg box that shows cows and chickens are pecking around outside, and these are not free range, they are battery farm eggs, and that those eggs have never been laid in anything other than a huge indoor factory with artificial light. And what it would be better to do is not have a photo of a farm, because it suggests, it impersonates eggs that are from a real farm out in the sunshine. So we're right in a place now at the moment where AI is hyped as artificial intelligence, when actually it's not, it's artificial impersonation. We might be okay when we know it's impersonating, or we should simply just bring children up to know that when they use this stuff, it's not the same. That is not a human being singing. That is not anything that's composed. It's ripped off, or it's created stuff out of other human created material. And we know that if we don't keep updating it with human created material, but just its own material, it degenerates. The impersonation and the content gets worse and worse and less intelligent. So there's a danger now that the bubble of hype that was around this being artificial intelligence, and when that does come along, we've no idea what it might look like. It's probably not going to be generative AI in its current form, which uses too much electricity, although they're building data centers underground to put in huge servers that are going to be boiling hot and cooled with the water from our rivers, whole other area. But if it is a bubble that bursts, We might find that artificial intelligence is biological, and we might want to ask whether we want that, whether we get closer to real human intelligence if we have to grow brains in labs. And so on. That's certainly already happening. There are the earliest experiments of what's called organoid computing. But as I reflect back and sit here in the National Theatre, I am aware that there is a great deal of entertainment to be had from impersonation. It's even more of a spectacle when you believe that that person was Richard III or Richard II, by not looking like them, but by simply lifting the wonderful text of the writer and acting it and immersing in it so much that even the actor feels like they're the character and they have no ongoing intention to deceive. Artificial intelligence, artificial impersonation, these are some of the ethical challenges I'm taking into the next year, because I think the distinction between the two becomes more important, but becomes more and more inconvenient to corporations.